welcome to the City of East Providence City Council meeting. Today is Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. Deputy Clerk, may we start off with a roll call, please?
Councilman Cahoon.
I'm here.
Councilman Morato.
Here.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Here.
Councilwoman Souza.
Here.
Council President Brito.
Yeah, thank you. Chair will recognize a motion for City Council to meet in closed executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42-46-5A2 and 42-46-5A1 and 2 and 4. Regarding the job performance litigation related to City Clerk Samantha Burnett, employee was given the option to have her job performance discussion held in public session in accordance with the statute and has not requested that, instead the discussion being open. New claims, first one will be new claims and abatement listed on the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion at this point in time to proceed in executive session?
Mr. President, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call?
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza. Council President Brito.
Aye. A motion to go in executive session was passed by a vote of 5-0. We will now proceed in executive session and reconvene immediately following. And we'll be joined by the Assistant City Solicitor, Dylan Conley. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City of East Providence City Council meeting. Today is Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. May we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I just ask for those who have hats on, if you can kindly take them off.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Clerk, may we start off with a roll call, please?
Yes, Council President. Councilman Cahoon.
I'm here.
Councilman Morato.
Here.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Here.
Councilwoman Souza.
Here.
Council President Brito.
Here. Next item, please. Would anyone like to, at this point in time, make a motion to seal the executive session meeting?
So moved, Mr. President.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
Consent calendar. It's the council journals. It's to approve the regular meeting minutes from October 19th, 2021, and executive session 2021.
Do I have a motion on the executive session meeting minutes?
Move to accept.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
We have the tax abatements.
Motion to approve.
Anyone like to second that motion?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
Licenses, non-public hearing.
So before we proceed with this, can we bundle this, or would anyone like, unless a council member has any concerns regarding items bundle A 1 through 4?
I do not.
Presuming we have no issues with any of the
Presuming that we
paperwork.
have no issues with any of them.
I have no issues with that.
Okay.
No objection.
So that would include the road race, application for holiday sales, application for secondhand auto truck deal and junkyard, and application for victual license. No objections. Do I have a motion?
So move as proposed in a bundle.
And I just want to make sure that that bundle included the road race, number 1.
Yes.
I just didn't hear it. Okay. So
These are non-public hearings.
A1, A2, A3, and A4, and I
One, two,
second the motion.
Okay. Roll call vote. Deputy.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. So for those of you here for licenses, you're all set.
We have public.
Except
Well,
for,
the public hearing ones, yeah.
let me rephrase that, except for, this is not public hearing for, with the exception of the liquor license. Now we may proceed for public hearing for liquor license, please.
Public hearing for liquor license. It's a new license application. The applicant is Stephen Costa. The business name is Rose's Tavern, and the address is 182 Anthony Street in East Providence, 02914.
Did they give you everything they need? you
They
need?
have.
Okay, I'll let you know. At the request of the council, any questions, concerns, issues? Okay, this is a public hearing. Is the applicant here at this time? I didn't see him. Oh, okay, there he is. This is, again, a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this license, please approach the podium. I'll announce it one other time. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this license, please approach the podium. Sir, approach. Can you just state your name and address for the record, please? Is that green light on? No. Can you push that button on it?
My name is Gary Soderlund. I own the house at 166-168 Anthony Street. Now, this is rental property. So I asked the tenant who is living there now what their opinion was of the part of the entertainment and dancing aspect of it. Not necessarily the liquor license, but the entertainment version. And he did not like that idea so close to where he lives. And so, because it's a high-density residential area, and no one really knows just how noisy it's going to get.
This is a residential area, if I'm not mistaken.
It
It
is, it's a
Yeah.
high-density residential area, yeah. And so this tavern is going right into a residential area.
Is this a previous, was this a previous,
It was a
Liquor
restaurant.
establishment?
It was
Oh,
a
it was?
restaurant, it's, Camella's, Carmine. It was
Well-
a restaurant a while ago, but it's been vacant for a very long time.
Okay, well, I walked that area today, just to familiarize myself with it. Now, that, the address of that building is on Waterman Avenue. That's 92 Waterman Avenue. That's not Anthony Street. And so,
Sir,
because-
is this with respect to the license itself or the entertainment
well,
that
the
you're referencing?
entertainment.
The entertainment, okay, so
Yeah.
right now, we're on the license,
Oh, okay.
and you said you have no objections for the license?
No, no
Okay,
objection to it.
so if there's no objections or no public comment for the liquor license,
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that there was a
that's okay.
separate issue.
I'll close out public comment right now just for the liquor license, and then we'll go right into the
Okay.
entertainment as
I
well.
have no objection.
And you
to
have
the
no
liquor
objections to that. So
No.
at the pleasure of the council, we have any questions or concerns with respect to this license?
I don't have any.
What, maybe Councilwoman Souza's more familiar. I'm not familiar with a tavern or restaurant on Anthony Street. Is there parking?
So it's at the corner of Anthony and Waterman Ave, so diagonal from the deli, the old deli.
Yep.
So that vacant, that property has been vacant for a very long time.
So part of it is on Waterman.
So the
Yeah.
door that you would enter is on Anthony Street. The building, so the building's sideways, the building actually faces Anthony Street, but it does have a part on Waterman Ave. But I don't believe that the address, it's surprising that the address is actually Waterman when there's no front entrance, but they could have built it that way where the entrance is on the
Right,
side.
well, I stood there because it confused me
Right.
at the time. And so the entrance is on Anthony Street.
Right, right.
But the actual number is 92 Waterman.
So then that's conflicting, I was gonna say, because then that's conflicting with this.
So, I can speak to that.
But what we could do is, we're just here for the license at this point in time. We can clarify that. I don't think it's up to us to clarify the location of what the address is. I think we could do that
But do we
internally
need to
here.
approve the license to the right address?
That is the correct address. It's because the door is situated on Anthony.
Right.
That's why, just if your front door was on whatever street it's on, that is why that, because we questioned that ourselves in the office, and, because we thought it was Waterman Ave also. So we asked Building and Zoning and
Yes, corner lots.
the corner lots are like that, because the front entrance is on Anthony Street, that is the address we had to put on the application.
All right. So with that
There
being
is
said,
on-site parking and off.
Yeah, I see it in the.
I'm going to close public comment at this point in time. And at the pleasure of the council, anyone like to make a motion regarding the license alone?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, would anyone like to second that motion? We have a second by Councilman Morado. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote on this, please?
Councilman Cahoon?
Aye.
Councilman Morato?
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick?
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza?
Aye.
Council President Brito?
Aye, next item, please.
Next item is the application for dance and entertainment license. It is a new one from the applicant Stephen Costa for Rose's Tavern at 182 Anthony Street.
Okay,
Sir,
sir.
how long have you lived in that, adjacent to this business?
I've owned that house for over 35 years. I do not live in the house.
Okay. Were your tenants, the previous owners, did they have entertainment? The previous business?
No, no, it was strictly a restaurant venue.
owner? Okay.
Um,
Are the owners here?
Yes, he's in the back.
May I ask a question real quick? I just want to see if this is,
This is the building.
is that the house that you own?
No, no.
It's on the other
no,
side?
Yeah, yeah,
It's on Waterman Ave?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it would actually be
166,
over here.
yeah, it's across the street. It's on the side where the Waterman Deli,
Okay.
former
All right.
Waterman Deli
Gotcha.
is.
Thank you.
So, sir, are you questioning the entertainment? What type of entertainment, or are you just against the
Well,
entertainment in
it's
itself?
entertainment and dancing, and so I didn't know the specifics as to what type of entertainment.
Well, the applicant is here, he can explain that to all of us.
Okay,
If you
and I
don't
don't know what hours it would go into, but, I mean, you can look out of the house that I own and actually see it. And so it's just very close, and I got, because I don't live there, it's really not my opinion, so I asked the person who's actually living there, and they said they would not like the idea of
Okay. We can get some of your questions answered by the
Okay.
applicant who's right behind you. So
Yeah.
if you can just move to the side just a little, sir, and allow him up. Mr. Costa, can you just state your name and address for the record, please?
Stephen Costa, 89 Miles Ave, East Providence.
Go ahead.
As far as the dance and entertainment, the only reason we applied for is it's a small location, it's 45 seats maybe. We only applied for that in the event of maybe in the spring, we could do just a gentleman playing acoustic guitar or a little singer there. It's not to do dance and entertainment and having a dance hall or anything like that. It's more if we have a special event, just to have somebody there maybe playing an acoustic. It's not going to be a weekly thing. It might be once in the summer, maybe twice for a special event. That's the only reason why we applied for that.
But once the license is granted to you, if it is granted to you, then you are allowed to have it.
We understand that, and we're not looking to do that. Like I said, the restaurant, it's more of a restaurant. We're not looking to do bands or dance hall or anything like that at all.
What type of food
It's
you going to
gonna-
be serving?
We're going to be doing a little bit mix of more Italian-based, Portuguese influence as well. This is a family-operated operation. We're lifelong residents of East Providence. I have my family here with me. My brothers, my sister, and my brother-in-law will be helping me run the restaurant. We've all worked in restaurants throughout East Providence. Some of you know me from the restaurants I've worked at as a chef. And now is the time for us to settle down and do our own establishment in the city and support. We're also going to be supporting the local supply chains where our food. We're going to be talking to Taps and Brains of Portugal, a new wine distributor that's coming into Phillipsdale. So we're very supportive of our local economy and to support everybody. And we're just looking to do a small little family restaurant. Again, on the dance and entertainment, it's more, if we can do it in the springtime, a little acoustic solo.
It's always a good plug when you're applying for your license.
I think this is a great idea, and I'm actually really excited that something's actually going in there. There's been a couple of potential people who were looking
Yes.
to go there prior, and they, for whatever reason, it just never fell through.
Right.
And so this is actually great for that neighborhood because it needs something in that area.
So just a little background on, it was Camellia's, the Middle Eastern restaurant. And actually 6 years ago, I looked at the location, and with the old owner, it didn't pan out, but it has been closed for around 6 or 7 years. And we decided to look into it again. As far as the 182 Anthony, the reason that's set up is it comes with a single-family house adjacent to it, and that's the reason why the parcel is set up all on 182 Anthony Street. So that kind of explains why it is 92 Waterman Ave is the restaurant location, but because the house, there's no yard or anything, so they put it onto one parcel, and that's why it's 182, and that's what I talked to Stephanie about, because I asked the same question about that.
Thank you for that
Mr. Costa?
explanation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just thanking him for that.
I was just going to ask, are you willing to, communicate with, it's Mr. Soderlund? And, exchange numbers with Mr. Soderlund and just make sure his tenant's okay with,
Yes, I have no issue with that at all, yep.
Mr. Costa, are you fully owner now? You've closed? You've bought-
No, we actually had in a stipulation, if the licenses didn't pass, we wouldn't have closed for the simple fact that it is a small
Sure.
location, and without me being able to do liquor in the establishment, it wouldn't be feasible for us to do a restaurant and what we're looking to do. So now that this is said and done, we will be doing the closing in the next week or two.
Okay.
This is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this, please approach the podium. If not, public hearing is now closed, and at the pleasure of the council, I'll leave it after this
I make
point.
a motion to approve.
Okay, we have
the entertainment license.
I'll second that.
Okay, Deputy Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilman Cahoon?
Aye?
Councilman Morato?
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick?
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Good
you
luck.
very much.
I
Welcome.
look forward to walking there.
Next
for
item, please.
Lunch and dinner.
It's the annual alcoholic beverage renewals. The attachment is attachment A
Okay.
for you guys that have it.
Yep. Any questions regarding any of the any of the renewals that are on the list from anyone?
Is the clerk's office aware of any hardships due to the pandemic? Everything pretty much up to date?
Yeah, no one has come forward saying that they have a hardship. We haven't gotten anything back from the state. We get all of our notices from them. Nothing has come back in a negative standpoint.
Okay.
With that being said, would anyone like to make a motion?
Well, I just had another question. Anything from the tax office side where there's any liens or holds unpaid?
Nothing yet. We haven't
Yeah.
had anything come through.
All right, can we just
doesn't mean-
verify that? If there is, then.
We normally are told because we can't process it. So we're not allowed to give it to them without their taxes being paid.
All right. All right, that being said, I make a motion to approve.
I'll
on-
second.
Now, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak
Sorry.
Oops.
Yeah.
against any licenses, please approach the podium. Anyone here wishing to speak against the licenses, please approach the podium. If not, public hearing is now closed. We have a motion on the floor by Councilwoman Souza to approve the annual alcohol beverage renewals. Anyone second?
I seconded.
Seconded by Councilman Cahoon. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote on this, please?
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Is no proclamations and presentations? No, we have, next one will be communications.
Yep, we have Gary Menasian for road races at Pierce Field. I don't know if I said that
Okay.
right.
Does he have, did he submit all his paperwork? I think he does this
did.
annually.
Yes.
Everything all set?
Yeah,
Does the police need to be notified as well?
they will,
did he-
Stephanie will process that.
Okay. At the pleasure of the council, anyone have any questions or concerns regarding this road race?
As long as Councilman Cahoon enters, I move approval.
Okay. Anyone like to second that motion?
Sure, I'll
It's not on
second.
for a
It's
vote.
not on for a vote. It's
Oh,
just a
I'm sorry.
Communication, okay.
Sorry.
You still
Just
have,
So
let
can we
you
just
know.
say what the date is for the,
That one was,
just for the record?
this one is on, let's get a few of them here. It's a little far out, March 13th, 2022.
Yeah, he's always ahead of himself.
Thank you.
Okay. Is no public comment?
No public comment,
All right. No appointments?
no appointments.
No council members?
No,
Public hearing ordinances, it takes us down to
I got
first
that.
passage and final passage.
All right, so first and final, this is an ordinance of the council of the city of East Providence appropriating $20,000 for the senior center security system.
And this was the $20,000 that we effectively saved from the carousel
Yes.
security system.
That's
So
correct.
that said, I'll move to approve.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next. Next item, please.
We have new business, mayor communications.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Good evening, members of the council. I'll have Battalion Chief Carey explain the vaccination efforts we're going through right now. You good?
Good evening. As many of you may be aware, the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices met today and unanimously voted to approve the Pfizer vaccine for children ages 5 to 11. We've been working with the Rhode Island Department of Health for the last couple of weeks to prepare for this event. We have tentative dates and locations that have already been established. The only thing that we're waiting for right now is final approval from the Rhode Island Department of Health. I'm told that should be either late afternoon tomorrow or by Thursday. I can give you tentative dates and locations now as we set them up. The regional pod that we're running at 585B Town Avenue, Chopstown Mall, on November 8th from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. November 10th at Hennessy School, same hours. November 12th, Myron Francis School, same hours. November 15th at Waddington School for the same hours. November 15th at Providence Country Day for the same hours. And November 17th at Emma G. Whitenack School for the same hours. And finally, we will have one more at the Regional Pod on November 22nd from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. We chose 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. so that parents would be able to get there after work and we wouldn't interrupt the school. If the council has any questions?
Chief,
You go first, sir.
I'm sure you have, but has there been good communication with the school department so they might get notice out to parents? They have the automatic phone calling or?
So we
Whatever.
have not sent out the advisory yet, but all of these pods set up in the system are ready to go. We just need the Rhode Island Department of Health to give us the final approval
Okay.
and final direction, and then it'll go out through the mayor's office and the school department at the same time. But right now, these are not open to the public. We're just giving you the interim dates
Okay.
so that everybody can prepare ahead of time, and the news release will come out through the mayor's office and the school department to all the parents, so they can go online and actually sign up for those dates.
Thank you.
Chief, you're not anticipating any issue with supply, vaccine supply at all, are you?
We're told that everything will be up running, no problem with supply.
Okay, thank you.
The Hennessy date, can you give me that one again, please?
Hennessy School is on November 10th.
And will parents be able, or anybody over the age of 18 at those specific dates also be able to get any shots, or is it going to be strictly for the age group of the
I
children?
believe we're doing these pods strictly for the children from 4 to 8, but all of these are set up on the same days that we run normal pod days. So if the parents want to come in before this one starts at the regional pod on Taunton Avenue, they can get their shot that day before bringing their child in.
What is the hours for the regional pod?
The regional pod is Mondays and Wednesdays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., and on Fridays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
And are we still doing any COVID testing for people?
The testing site is still over at Breed Hall, being run by a private agency.
Okay. And are they doing just the antigen, or are they also doing PCR?
They're doing PCR
Okay.
predominantly.
Do you have to have the symptoms, or are they doing just whoever may need the PCR?
I believe that you can go online and sign up for a
Just-
test. I don't think you need to have symptoms,
Okay.
or at least I don't think anybody's policing that.
Okay. All right. So it's all by appointment only still?
Yes.
Any other further questions?
Thank you.
None? Thank you,
You're
sir.
welcome.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Thank you, Chief.
So the last matter that we have on mayoral communication, the city has received approval by Rhode Island Department of Transportation to complete a wire drop and physical alterations at the bike path at Riverside Square.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item.
Reports of other city officials. It's the report of the city solicitor, Claims Committee report.
Thank you, Council President, Madam Clerk. As your council, as the public knows, before this meeting, the City Council met as a Claims Committee to take action on the following claims. Claims of Arnold Battersby in the amount of $240 was approved. The claim of Dawn Brown in the amount of $118.54 was referred to the vendor, Pawtucket Hot Mix. The claim of Imoni Duarte was in the amount of $335.19 was referred to the alleged responsible contractor, National Grid. The claim of Teresa Rowe was referred to the city's insurance carrier, and the sewer charge abatement of $524.33 of Mr. Richard Smith was approved. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. Next item, please.
Resolutions. The first resolution is a resolution in support of proposed legislation allowing the Riverside Post Holding Company, DBA American Legion Post 10, permanent exemption from taxation. The sponsor is Councilman Morato and Councilwoman Souza.
I can read this one. So it's resolution in support of the proposed legislation allowing the Riverside Post Holding Company, also known as the American Legion Post Number 10 on Willard Avenue, permanent exemption from taxation. It's not long, so I'll read it. Whereas the American Legion Riverside Post Holding Company, DBA American Legion Post 10, incorporated in 1955, is acknowledged by the IRS as a 501c charitable organization And whereas the American Legion Post 10 is acknowledged by the state as a Rhode Island nonprofit corporation that uses its facility located at 830 Willard Avenue, Riverside, Rhode Island, 02915, and whereas the property to be exempt is specifically described within the city of East Providence on map 513, block 27, parcel 001.00, and said exemption shall only be applied to said units, and whereas the American Legion Post 10 will be requesting that legislation be introduced in the Rhode Island General Assembly granting a permanent exemption from taxation. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of East Providence hereby supports the request of the American Legion Post 10 for permanent exemption from taxation as long as said property is held by the American Legion Post 10. Now therefore be it further resolved that the City Council of the City of East Providence hereby requests that the city clerk send a copy of this resolution to the governor of the state of Rhode Island, the lieutenant governor of the state of Rhode Island, the president of the Rhode Island Senate, the speaker of the Rhode Island House of Representatives, and the senators and representatives from the city of East Providence. This resolution shall become effective upon its passage. I'll take any questions from the council if you have any.
A couple questions. I didn't get a chance. I saw it on the docket. There hasn't been much discussion about it. What about other similar agencies in the city? There is another Legion in Riverside on the Causeway, Crescent View Avenue. I know they're not as vibrant, but they're there. What about the Elks Club and various other clubs that do a lot for veterans and citizens?
Correct.
And
So when
Knights of Columbus, et cetera.
Correct. So when I was approached with this, the example that was being used was the Knights of Columbus and how they are tax exempt. And in fact, they are. And I guess what happened when the state did that receivership back in 2011 and 2012, they made everyone pretty much pay taxes, but on a huge reduced discount. And since then, some of those nonprofits have gained this status that the Legion is trying to gain. That's my understanding. I don't know if the other VFW has the same status or the other nonprofits. And Councilwoman and I just talked about maybe including them all, but I think that would just get complicated. And since this one is obviously in my ward and they've approached me on it, and we were going to do it together in one resolution, but felt that it should be separate. So I hope that answers your question.
As a 501c3, how much are they paying now?
So I think they pay a reduced assessment. I think it's $80,000. 80,000 on the property. So they said they're paying as if the property is valued at 80,000, I believe is, I don't know how
Okay.
accurate I am on that.
So the 501c designation by the federal government does not affect their right for property taxes under Rhode Island law. You need a special exemption. 4443 lists all the properties that exempt for taxation, and obviously this group doesn't qualify under the current statutory scheme, and so therefore he's asking for a specific exemption for this property at that location, much like we did for the Rhode Island Historical Society
The school, not too long
a
ago.
couple weeks ago, a couple years ago.
On Wampanoag Trail, correct.
Does it impact at all the fact that they have a bar in the basement, and
Correct.
is there exemptions for any of that, or is this
So I guess
just
the
a
way it's
property of the value of the building,
Correct.
property tax? Has nothing to do with business taxes or other?
My understanding is property taxes. That's what the exemption, the request for the exemption is for.
And we're not giving the exemption, we're asking the state to pass a law to allow the exemption, so it's a resolution in support of a change of state law, basically. We can't grant that exemption.
Right, so similarly to Councilman Morato's, the one that's up next is for, the Holy Rosary Band Society. They too fall under an organization, like similar organizations within the city who already have requested and are under that exemption. They are new to the city, obviously, so that's why they're seeking it here. They had this while they were in Providence in their previous location.
So let's take the first resolution, then we'll jump right into the second one.
I have one question, and Councilman Morado, I would imagine that you've decided to put this forward because of the things that they do in the community. They sponsor the annual parade, et cetera, et cetera.
So that building, as you know, it's one of the, honestly, I'm trying to work with Governor Reed's, I'm sorry, Senator Reed's office and seeing if we can get some type of grant money. That building is in dire need of repair. As you know, I painted that building a year ago. That was like literally putting lipstick on a pig, but it does look a lot better. That building is utilized by so many people in the community. And a lot of times, it's utilized for free, too, for those that can't, I know that for a fact, when they can't afford it. They do the May, Memorial Day Parade in May. To me, it's a key piece of Riverside. It's, people have meetings there all the time. Any way I can help the veterans and the people, the numerous veterans that still use that Legion. I don't know how other Legions are around the state or country as far as the decline, but that one still gets utilized quite often. They just had a fundraiser this past Saturday, $5 entry, and people are there all the time. So anything I can do to help them, I'm on it.
Councilman, you want to phrase that into a
Sure.
motion?
Yep, I'll make a motion to approve resolution in support of proposed legislation allowing the Riverside Post Holdings Company, DBA American Legion Post 10, permanent exemption from taxation. For this resolution to be sent to the state delegation for approval.
Second. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. That leads us into the next resolution.
The next resolution is a resolution in support of proposed legislation allowing the Holy Rosary Band Society permanent exemption from taxation. The sponsors, Councilman Morato and Councilwoman Souza.
Similar to the previous resolution, we're not giving authority, nor that we have authority to do this. It is solely kicking this up to the state delegates who are already in contact with and are aware and are waiting for this so that they can move it forward. The band house is new to the city, but not new to the state. They've been an organization that has deep roots in the community with a lot of members that are in the city of East Providence, even though their facility was initially outside of our city boundaries. They do a lot of community service and public work, and they, again, fall under where other societies or social clubs within the city also fall under the same, and they're seeking for the same compensation to be considered at the state level.
Unless there's no questions, Councilwoman, would you like to?
I just have one statement. I always feel kind of squishy about doing these. I mean, and these are two good organizations, right? It's hard to fault either one of them for what they do. There's obviously a cost to providing this benefit to these organizations. I think a lot of that cost is offset by the value that they bring the community. I also think that, and this is just my perspective, we're largely stuck with a lot of these because so many of them have been granted over the years, right? I mean, I think that there is a case if someone were to look for a specific exemption. You bring up the Legion, Councilman Morato, and they immediately point at the Knights of Columbus and say, well, they have an exemption. They're pretty similar in nature in what they do. It's kind of hard to me to make a legal case against these exemptions. I think this is why it's doubly important to do things like extend the tax base so that we can offer these exemptions to those organizations, those agencies that do provide value back to the city. So just a soapbox, but I'm going along with it.
Yeah. Well, it's nice, too, because it expands on, the cities wanting to grow the arts, and this is certainly a big, well-known band in the community and nationally. So with that, I make a motion to approve the resolution to support the proposed legislation allowing the Holy Rosary Band Society permanent exemption for taxation to be sent to the General Assembly for their consideration.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, resolution.
The next resolution is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract amendment with FR Engineering Group, Inc. for additional work related to the repair of the seawall at Rose Larissa Park. The sponsor is Councilman Cahoon and Councilman Morato.
Councilman Marauder, do you want to start, or do you want me to go ahead?
Go ahead, I just did the other one, so.
Okay. Yeah, I think that, it should be no surprise to anyone that you start digging into what's going on with that seawall. There are going to be problems that you discover. It's been up there for a long, long time. It's been taking quite a pounding over all that time. I think it's critically important to not just the fabric, but the security of that neighborhood to be protected against sea level rise. Numerous people have made the observation that the opposite side of the Providence River, talking about the Cranston and Warwick side, is essentially hardened against the battering of waves and surge, et cetera. And what that does is it really brings a lot of that energy back to our side. So it makes sense that what we should do is harden our own side accordingly. I guess we're all building fences. But if we don't take these steps, it's only going to continue to deteriorate, and it's going to deteriorate at an accelerating rate. The proposed resolution is associating the fee with funds that are coming from ARPA to the extent of $255,564. I am not thrilled about the idea of continued use of ARPA funds for infrastructure projects. That said, I can understand how that part of the community is so involved and is so intertwined with really everything that we are as a city, that it must be protected. And of course, there are houses there and parks and everything else. So we've heard the claims or seen the data that it looks like there's potential that stretch of waterfront could become swimmable within the foreseeable future. I think that's a game changer for the city of East Providence if people can actually start to get into that water safely. So I think we really have to take any and all steps that we can to preserve that land.
Any questions from the council? If not, Councilman Cahoon, would you like to phrase all that into a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to move to approve the resolution.
Second.
Okay.
Who wants it?
Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a license agreement with the State of Rhode Island Department of Transportation for use of state-owned land for parking only at Warren Ave and Burgess Ave. The sponsor is Councilwoman Souza.
So I just had a couple of questions. Mike, I would assume you were involved in the contract? That's it? Dan? Hi, good evening. So in regards to the contract, there was language, and I get the state's gonna protect themselves, that mentioned when the contract may end, or if there was a termination in the contract, that we, the city, would have to revert the property to where it was initially found. What's the likelihood that that's going to be something that the city's going to be doing or need to do? Because I know for long-term, our use is to have it, used for the city.
Yeah, the intent of the parking lot is more for winter snow events where we need
Right.
off-street parkers to park in that parking lot. We don't intend on doing major construction there. I mean, it's just likely maybe a fence to sort of delineate the property, but there won't be anything major that we'll have to revert back to
This was a renewal too, by the way, I'm sorry. This was a renewal, this was already in effect, it just expired, so.
No, right, and we hadn't really done anything to it yet, because I believe the conversations that, maybe a year ago, it was just going to, maybe just put some stone down,
Yeah, we were hoping to actually utilize some of the granite that's actually off of Pawtucket Avenue, just to sort of delineate the property, keep cars from kind of
right, going
driving in
into
it.
the highway.
Correct, exactly.
What were we looking for the ground covering? Because right now it's all grass. What was the plan to do for that?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. One of my suggestions might be to use some of the roadway clippings that we have at the landfill that's taken from the paving efforts we do in the city. A lot of that material is brought back to the landfill
The
and
milling?
the millings, yeah. Yep.
Okay. And how, so would the city, because I'm just trying to think of what the cost, right, think of what the
The
cost
city,
would
yeah,
be.
we would do a lot of the
Would
work
do-
internally. Highway crews and parks
Right.
crews would do.
And
the
do we
work.
know when we would anticipate that taking place? Do we have a timeline, or is this just we want to renew the contract, and then when we can get to it, we get to it?
Correct. I think it's more of a renewal. This won't happen this year,
Right.
probably at the earliest in the spring.
But we're paying the state $250 when we, currently, so we've been paying them.
It's the same amount, it didn't go up.
Okay,
They didn't ask for an increase.
good. Did we ask for a decrease?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, I think it's a win-win. I know I've talked to the businesses in the area, and they're looking forward to being able to have some more parking. I know the intent is more for the winter parking, but at the same time, with the renewal of the waterfront district and everything that's going on at the bottom of Warren Avenue, when all those clubs and the Comedy Connection are at full capacity, there are cars all over the place.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean,
So that'll help.
Yep, that'll help
And
alleviate.
they're all in support.
With that, if there are no further questions regarding that, I move for approval.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon?
Aye.
Councilman Morato?
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick?
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza?
Aye.
Council President Brito?
Aye. Next item, please.
Introduction of ordinances for first passage. An ordinance and amendment of Chapter 18 of the revised ordinance of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island, 1998, as amended, entitled Vehicles and Traffic. This is to put a stop sign at Arnold Street and Sprague Ave. The sponsor is Councilman Morato.
So I had a call from one of the residents a couple of weeks ago, and I met with the residents. Arnold Street, if anyone's familiar, it's just a regular residential neighborhood street. And I spoke to all the residents in that immediate area, and they're all in agreement that they would like to see a stop sign, just like the same three-way stop sign of every next intersection, which I believe is Arnold at, I don't know, Director Borges can remember. I forgot, Dyer, I believe, Arnold with Dyer.
Right.
And then consequent, and further down the road, so if anyone has any questions, I move for approval.
Okay. This is for first passage, so therefore there's no public hearing on this.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon?
Aye.
Councilman Morato?
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick?
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza?
Aye.
Council President Brito?
Aye. Next item, please. Ordinance.
An ordinance and amendment of Chapter 11 of the revised ordinances of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island, 1998, as amended, entitled Personnel. The summary is to amend Section 11-4 to allow Personnel Director to certify employment and promotional lists not acted upon by Personnel Hearing Board within 14 days of their submission. The sponsor is Councilman Cahoon.
So this is the requested amendment to 11-4. It does go along with the subsequent request or proposed amendment to various other sections related to this same ordinance. There are a couple of changes in here that are administrative, changing, obviously, the phrase city manager, which doesn't exist anymore, to the phrase mayor, removing pronouns his primarily, and in fact, putting the name of the position of the person who is going to be responsible for that duty, director's possessive instead of his or her. And then the key point, as the deputy clerk pointed out, what this would do is it would add provision 7 or paragraph 7, which would allow the personnel, or would allow the appointing authority the opportunity to certify those things that are not timely. Now, not timely is actually called out in the second of the ordinances that we'll talk about in a minute. So it's a little bit tricky, but the whole idea behind these two is, if you recall, was it a year and a half ago, the council was approached by the administration about the idea of disbanding the Personnel Hearing Board because it was not moving quickly enough to make timely hires. I think that there is a lot of sense in the idea of increasing the pace at which hires are made. Many of us have made observations to the fact that we don't appear to have sufficient staff in certain areas, or the staff might be overwhelmed. Parks and Rec comes up as a fairly frequent area where, you know, we got workers that are kind of going all the time and shoveling you-know-what against the tide many times. So the idea here being, between these two ordinances, and we have to do one at a time, I guess, but between these two ordinances, if the Personnel Hearing Board cannot certify the list within 14 days, then that will become the authority or the responsibility of the personnel director to then certify the list and move on. So that's really it in a nutshell. So I guess, Mike, just one question. Though we have to address these ordinances one at a time, really it doesn't make any sense to approve one without approving the other sections. So I don't know if it makes sense for us to go through the other Personnel Hearing Board ones now, just so everybody can be apprised of the changes. Okay. And then that way, we're not making any votes in a vacuum. So the second of the two is under 11-26. One of the changes that you will see here is the charter is specifically section 9.1 of the charter calls out the Personnel Hearing Board and the constituency of the Personnel Hearing Board. The charter does call for 5 members. There are currently 5 members serving on the Personnel Hearing Board. The ordinance still says 3. So the ordinance is just updated to reflect the charter. The second change is under section 11-28. This is where the members of the hearing board are appointed by the mayor, subject to the approval of the city council. Again, this is consistent with the charter. We've heard Assistant Solicitor Conley tell us a number of times that the intent and sense of the charter is largely appointments are made by way of the administration, by way of the chief executive, with many of those being approved by the council. It does add the language that at least one member shall be a resident of each of the wards of the city. That is language that comes from the charter. It also changes the quorum. Obviously, when you had 3 members, the quorum was 2. You have 5 members, the quorum is now 3. And then the last section that really has a change is that 14-day provision. That would be section 11-31. This would be basically putting the time fuse on the date to certify, so that in the instance where the Personnel Hearing Board cannot come together and meet timely, the administration can then go on and proceed, so you don't have instances whereby people who have applied for a job after an extended period of time decide either they no longer want the job or they found a different or better job. This does give the administration the ability to move in an agile fashion. So that's the intent of really all these ordinances. I know we're considering them one at a time, but they really have to be thought about together because they don't make, none of them make sense on their own.
So I have a question, because I know, again, it's been a rolling issue with quorums. What is the process, because I don't see anywhere that it says what the process is that calls on the Personnel Hearing Board to have a meeting?
it's not in this order, this is a section of the ordinance, but it's,
Yeah.
this is, so they have to have a meeting within, there's no limit, there's no time limit for them to certify the list right now.
Right.
So they have to comply with the open meetings law to have at least 48 hours notice, so they have to post at least 48 hours before they can have a meeting, and that's the only
Right, so they just
requirement.
need 2 days of advance notice.
Correct.
And they should meet at any time and place that is called by the chair or director of the board. But so there's been a lack, right? So we're saying that they're not getting the list, they're not having the certification done, but what is the process on the city side that gets them notified?
Oh, so the city goes through its hiring process and has the testing and whatnot, the list is created through the HR department. Once that list is created, it's then formally, the board is called and say, you need to come in and certify this list, and that's the process, basically. So we ask the board to come in and meet, and, I'm not in HR, but sometimes it's difficult to get a quorum of the board and whatnot, so there's usually a delay, but we cannot hire off that list.
Right.
The city can't hire off the list until it's certified.
But is there any issues with the HR department getting in touch or getting those lists to the?
I can't answer that, I don't know. I mean, I know there's been issues of them having the ability to meet quickly,
Right.
to get a quorum together, but
And I know we just have consistently had HR issues with, in the HR with, staff, so I don't know if that was contributing to.
We've lost good hires, isn't that one of the main points here? I remember recently or last year.
We have. So can you restate your question? I was having trouble on following.
What was the process to get the list that needs to be certified to the hearing board?
So they contact the hearing board and tell them that we need to have a list certified, either through, I think they were calling them and emailing them. And we had a process, I want to say maybe 2 months ago, where, they similarly take vacations at the same time. So it was difficult for us to get them to meet because, they just weren't available. And so this would alleviate us having to do that. So we say, hey, look, starting Monday, we need to have set up a meeting date to meet to certify this list. And if they can't meet within that 14 days, then after the 14 days, we can certify the list.
So, to the councilwoman's point, and if I can piggyback a little bit, right? So, I mean, we meet here on Tuesdays, we know it, right? We definitely have the first Tuesday, and we by default accepted the second Tuesday as well, right? So we know we're going to be here, right? Is there a challenge in not having them know that there's a regularity to their meeting, right? So like, if you were to call me and say, say we hadn't had a council meeting in months, and we need to meet next week, I might be like, well, next week's not real good for me because I haven't arranged for that time, I haven't set it on my calendar, and I got 87 things to do. Is there any thought to perhaps setting up regular meetings, whether it's the 4th Thursday of every month or something, and then if they don't need to certify a list, they don't need to meet?
We could try that approach.
Or just have-
The issue with that has been that when we hire, it's not regular. So every 2 weeks you're going to have a council meeting.
Sure.
We don't know every week when we need to hire someone. In other words, it could be, a bunch of people could retire from the police department tomorrow. So then that starts the process, and so we don't, there's
Can I
Right, but to-
interject?
Can I just finish my thought and then? So to that note, we know as a city when we put out for a job, right? So, and it's all over Facebook, and the people who are on the hearing board live in the city. So they know that, that there's a job being posted. I mean, I don't know when that job comes down or what the rest of that backroom process is, but when that process is occurring, it might be a good idea to then inform them, hey, we've just closed this application process. We anticipate needing a list within the next 30 days. Can you guys schedule something? You know what I mean? Like, I think there needs to be a better process in place so that we don't have to have somebody outside of the planning board, the personnel hearing board make that. Because to the councilman's point, if it's last minute, nobody's going to be available.
No, I understand that, but sometimes it's kind of a floating target as to when these processes, and we get done with the rankings and all that stuff, and have to submit the information. So it's kind of a moving target. And there's been a couple of times, like I said, where it's been difficult to get them together. And when they meet, it's kind of a quick, orderly fashion meeting. So I don't like taking away that flexibility from them for doing that. So when they have the flexibility, I would say maybe 3/4 of the time since I've been there, it kind of works out where we tell them, hey, look, we need to be able to certify this list by Monday. And we contact them the Tuesday before. And they're like, all right, we can meet on Friday. So a lot of times it works out, and it's a flexible time, so they're able to come in and out. I would hate to take that flexibility away from them and have them do regular meetings.
Oh, I'm not saying to do regular, I'm saying just give them more than that week notice in the event that somebody's on vacation, somebody has an after-school team that they coach, they're working later hours, or have family obligations, that they would get that notice maybe 2 or 3 weeks in advance and say, hey, I'm putting this on the radar. In the next 30 days, we're going to have a list that's going to need to be certified. Do you guys want to maybe set aside a couple of days in the next 30 days that we may be able to do that?
Again, the only issue that I see with that is just that sometimes these lists don't mature like we'd like them to do, as
Sure.
far as get to the same point in time. So we'd be stacking up lists to wait for regularly scheduled appointments.
I'm not saying, I think you're missing the point. I'm not saying to have regularly scheduled meetings. If in.
No, I know what you're saying.
Right, so it wouldn't be regularly scheduled. You would just give them ample notice to have a meeting anytime
We
during
give
the
them
month of the day.
usually a week to 10 days notice.
Well, with this now, aren't we talking about 14 days notice?
Yeah, 14.
That's the new twist.
Right.
So
but-
they're getting 14 days.
Right, so then they
to
wouldn't
meet.
need to authorize somebody else to codify the list, because they would be able to meet.
But if they don't, which has happened,
So could I just
Yep.
make a few comments? Councilman Rodrick, you introduced the same ordinance about a year ago, and at the time, HR Director Victor Santos came up. And in that ordinance, the mayor was to certify that list, correct?
No, that ordinance was different. That ordinance effectively eliminated the personal hearing board.
No, that's
Right?
not true, no.
It was similar to this one. It was similar to this one.
It did allow, the ordinance allowed the Director of Personnel to certify the list.
Okay.
Not the mayor, Director of Personnel.
So I do the recruitment for Bristol. I do the police recruitment, and I do the dispatch recruitment, which we are going, tail end of the police recruitment, and we're just finished the application process for the dispatch recruitment. The personnel board is a key component in keeping the integrity of a hiring list intact. When we set up a hiring process, we invite the personnel board to come in, and we work out the details of timelines, timeframes, when the application process will close, and when we anticipate the written exam to be. The written exams are done in such a manner that we try to eliminate every possibility of tampering with the process, where the candidate shows up, first of all, the personnel board, in our situation, they will order the exams. They will be in receipt of the exams. Candidates show up, they assign them a number, so that there's no names attached to it. They do the exam, they send them out to the company, they get the results back, they compile a list of standings with, where they finished on the exam written. We can have them compile a list of where they finish on the oral board and the agility. And when they compile those percentages, they put that list together from top to bottom, and they essentially certify the list, and they hand it over to the chief or town administrator, whoever we coordinate with. Same way with this process again, with the dispatch, to the point where we're doing an aptitude test. That was my idea, so we can at least know where they stand. I'm expecting the exams to come in on Thursday. The package, the way it's delivered, is going to be handed right to a personnel board member. We already coordinated that. I don't open the package. We try to keep it so that there's no, this one was favored and put up here, and this one was favored and then was moved over here. We eliminate that. That's the purpose and function of the Personnel Board. Sure. And and that time I argued, it's already in the charter for 5 members. Why don't you just appoint 2 more members? Which, by the way, I think we, as a council, and hopefully we can fix this next time around with the Charter Commission, that we too should have appointments at that board, because I think that board is a very important board. But that's neither here nor there. I don't agree with this ordinance because you are essentially eliminating the Personnel Board, which their function is to keep the integrity of a hiring process and create a certified list based on those standings, and handing that list over to HR director, chief of police, or whoever, they're going to hand them to. And they then pick from, they can interview the top 5 if they want, or they can say, we're going to interview the top 10.
So you don't
removing
think
that-
the 14 days is enough notice to get a quorum of the personnel?
I don't know if, I get you trying to get a quick turnaround. I don't know if 14 days is going to be enough based on what I'm hearing, that you can't get a quorum, which I don't understand how you can't get a quorum of 3 if you have already 5, and you pre-plan these. These hiring processes don't spring up in a weekend and they're done by Monday. These things are advertised, they're coordinated. You have to coordinate agilities with sometimes other departments that help out, written exams. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not a moving target.
So your concern is, may I ask, your concern is that the Personnel Hearing Board would be circumvented, or would be circumvented more frequently than it is by the 14-day limitation?
That is exactly my concern.
So why
that is
wouldn't
exactly-
we simply request the data as to how often the Director of Personnel certified versus the Personnel Hearing Board certifying?
But once you open this door, then you might as well get rid of the Personnel Board. Why even have a Personnel Board at that point? The Personnel Board, like as I just said, it's there to keep the integrity. Why wouldn't you want to keep, my chief of police wants nothing to do, all he wants is give me the list of top to bottom when you're done. All right, he doesn't want any involvement whatsoever, or give the impression to anyone, or plant that seed that he played games with that list. Because you know what happens, right? There's stories everywhere that,
Stories,
right? But
Stories.
but it does happen.
stories, fairy tales.
Okay. Yeah, but it does happen.
No, it doesn't. Not under my watch.
Okay, I'm not saying that happens there, but it happens.
Maybe in
I'm
Bristol.
not accusing you of anything, so you can relax a little bit.
I will relax.
Not accusing you
Okay.
of anything.
I'm glad.
So, but I
Thank
just want to follow this through, right? So I'm not aware of, so everything that we do in here, almost everything that we do in here has timelines associated with it, right? The most obvious example is the budget, right? We have to meet at certain times so that the budget can be done by a certain date, so that we can avoid the potential time for a veto, right? I mean, I'm not aware of anything in my personal life that doesn't have a deadline or a suspense, as we call them, associated with it. I don't know why we wouldn't, if we're expecting timely hires, why would we not impose a timeline? And I understand Councilwoman Souza's position of, these are volunteers, they have other things to do, yet they've also volunteered for the position. Why wouldn't we give them a timeline? I mean, 2 weeks sounds like a reasonable amount of time to me to get together and like you say, we don't do them all the time, right? It's not like it's a surprise, right? It's not like they don't have time to prepare or they're not involved with the process. I don't know why having a 2-week deadline wouldn't be reasonable.
Can I just add one more thing to this conversation? There's 2 lists that go in front of it, the certification list and the eligibility list. The eligibility list goes first. That tells you all the candidates that are eligible for that position. We rank them, went through however many candidates we have that pass. And then, once that list is certified, we have the certification list, which is different. The certification list looks at the top 5.
That's a rank order, right?
Rank
Yeah.
order, looks at the top 5, and then once we get that back from the Personnel Hearing Board, we start making calls. All right, are you available for this job? Are you interested? Sometimes they're not. So once we break that number, we're going to go back for that other list. It's another element that adds to the time and creates confusion with the list and creates delays.
So the idea is by imposing a time limit, you will run into that scenario less frequently, you won't exhaust your list of top-ranked candidates and have to start the process over.
Yeah. I don't anticipate this being done regularly. I mean, I would think that would be infrequent. They're pretty good with meeting with us, but there's certain times where they're not, and we're looking to, like, I mean, we had a discussion a couple of meetings ago, Council Vice President, about laborers, and just going through that list and trying to hire these laborers. You know, one day they're available, the next day, no, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in the position.
I was gonna say, like, police can be more of a sensitive issue, but I know during the summer, when we were trying to get fields done, and just as an example, not that that's the most critical need of the city, but when you have parents calling, and how come the fields are not the way they should be, and why isn't Townley Pride Park the way it should be? And the answer was, well, we got 3 guys, with 3 positions we're gonna put on, but, you know, the process, we've gotta wait, and summertime, Personnel Hearing Board. So I think there's a middle ground here. We're saying we want the Personnel Hearing Board to do it and stay.
But why would you have 2 lists, one of eligibility list and a certified list? Why isn't the personnel board putting those people in those ranks as to where they finish and just certify the list from 1 to, 20 or whoever, how many applied to that position?
That would be considered the eligibility list, and then I think we're able to pick from the top 5. But if you go through 3 candidates, and for whatever reason, say they fail a drug test or a back screen, then we have to certify the list again to bring up the other people.
But what I'm saying is, why isn't the personnel board, if you have 20 candidates applying for the Parks Department, why isn't, and they just say there's a written exam for whatever reason, right? The personnel board takes those scores, lists them according to how they finished, and rank them from 1 to 20. That list is then certified by the personnel board, given to whoever's going to do the hiring. Why does it have to be 2 lists? You know where they finished, and they certified it.
So the ordinance requires you the eligible list is 2 times. The ordinance requires not only that, what you just said, but then the names that actually get up who are eligible is twice the number of vacancies that you're trying to fill. And that's just by ordinance. So if you got two people openings, you got to put up 4 names. If you got 1 opening, you put 2 names. That's just the way the ordinance is written.
So I guess the ordinance needs to be corrected then,
That
because
could
it
be-
seems a
that-
little convoluted. and
That would be a great change. That's another issue for another day, but that would be a great change.
So why aren't we concentrating on that versus circumventing the personnel board?
We're not circumventing the personnel board. We're giving the personnel board 14 days to certify a list. If they don't meet within that
I
14
understand that.
days, that's
I-
14 days. If they can't meet in 14 days, then the director of personnel.
I'm done with my discussion, thank you.
All right, thank you.
We wouldn't be opposed to that.
I think what, so right now, does the personnel director have authority to certify the list?
No.
Okay, so that is in my, and I think that's what the councilman's probably trying to get. It's the personnel hearing board's job, that's what they've been tasked with, to do that. If we're giving them the extension to give them a reasonable amount of time, and you're saying that they have been doing a good job
Yeah.
as of whatever time frame that you're alluding to, then we wouldn't need to add that the personnel director needs, in the event that those days weren't enough, to then codify it. We wouldn't even need that. That wouldn't even be something that we would discuss, because we've already given them the enough time that they needed to meet and get that list taken care of and back to HR.
But what happens in the instance that they can't come together in 14 days? We start all over.
Well, that might be fewer than a majority, right? So I think putting this in is with the intent that they can't meet, and they haven't been meeting, so we need somebody else who's gonna be there to pick up the slack. But it sounds like it's the opposite, that they have been meeting, they have been providing you with the lists. We just wanna give them a better directive on, listen, you're gonna have this amount of days, this is your due date, and that'll give them more structure, which they'll probably have less time, but they will not be meeting and be able to give those dates, especially since they're a large
Well,
number.
are there specific examples anyone can cite where, I'm thinking of one a year or so ago, where did we lose a good finance person because in the interim, while that person was waiting, they took a job in another community? And I forgot what department it was in, but by all But by all means, that we heard from, the person was the top person, but said, I can't wait, I need a job, and I'm going to X community, because our Personnel Hearing Board wasn't meeting. They couldn't get a quorum. Has there been much of that?
This past summer with the labor list, yes. But I don't know about the finance director. I know Malcolm was.
Yeah, it might not have been
before my
that
time.
job, it might have been
But
the
this past summer with the labor.
tax.
We had, so, I mean, that was, like, so the summer was unskilled labor, that we had a list that we couldn't hire from because we couldn't get the board, the quorum is increased from 2 to 3 now. And I-
3 to
and I-
5?
3 to 5, sorry. No, 2 was, used to be, quorum was 2.
Oh, right, right.
And now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
3, and it was just difficult to get people together for summer. But again, we're not divesting the board of their
Right.
ability to do so. They just have to meet within 14 days of getting the list. If they fail to do so.
And I think that that's a reasonable,
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable.
So to recertify, what is the time span? How long is there? So in other words, you go through the list, you got your certified list, now you have to recertify for one reason or the other. How long is that time span?
I believe the lists are good for 2 years after certification. But again, you got to make the distinction between the eligibility list and the certification list. So say, for example, I'm 18th on the list for whatever position, and it's been a while before they get to me, but it's within that 2 years, and they can't meet, it poses problems, you know? I don't know did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did.
I mean, if you got
It's-
jobs,
yeah.
you got positions that are in demand, right? And right now, we've got, basically everybody's problem is we've got more positions than we can fill, right? I mean, everybody in America is having the same issue. You know, people have decided to take different avenues in their lives other than working all the time. So you've reduced the amount, the available pool, A. B, you must continue to do that business with those specific skill sets. We'll use police as a good example because Councilman Morale brought it up, right? The pool of available police candidates is not a huge pool. And everybody in Rhode Island is competing in the same pool. So to the extent that you delay a hire, you have basically created a situation where that candidate is now all the more likely to go to one of the other places and not be available for you to hire. So I think the issue is we need to be able to move out quickly in order to be able to make hires without removing the integrity of the Personnel Hearing Board process. We still have to hire people. You still have to have people here to do the job.
I just chime in, I just want to, so the question was how long the lists are effective. According to the ordinance, employment and promotional lists shall become effective upon approval of the hearing board, shall remain in effect for 1 year, and may be extended by action of the board for additional 6-month periods, provided that such eligible promotional list shall not remain in effect for more than 2 years. So it's up to the hearing board, not the director of personnel, not to anybody else, and that remains the same, to the hearing board, to extend the promotional list beyond 1 year.
When-
So even the director can't do that.
When
But
the
in the meantime,
personnel,
those people aren't sitting around
Right,
waiting for
exactly.
a
I'm just
year
saying,
to
but I-
take a job. They want to get paid something.
But the director said it was 2 years, I just wanted to make sure that we had accurate
Thank you.
information. You're welcome.
when the Personnel Hearing Board meets, is that something does that have to be an advertised meeting?
Yes.
So how many days? Is it the regular?
48 hours excluding weekends and holidays.
So it cuts into that 14 days? Or that we would, so you would call the Personnel Hearing Board, say, we've got to hire somebody, so you need 48 hours to advertise? So that-
Post.
To post, okay, so that knocks you to what, 12 days? So do we need to kick it up a little, 3 weeks?
Councilman Rodrick, like I said, before the process is even started, all of that is, all the timelines are already laid out. You can advertise 2 weeks prior to, you know,
I mean, the meeting, advertise
Correct.
at their meeting.
but you have, everything is spelled out.
The timelines to get to the list are set up. But
Correct.
beyond that, it's not.
For the police, for police, I don't know how fire is, but for police, there's deadlines that have to be met for the police academy,
We
for
do-
example.
We do it the same way.
You know, they have, we all go to the same police academy, they want specific things done on specific dates. So we already know that ahead of time.
Yeah, but the police are, I mean, they're a big part and important part of our community, but there are other departments like DPW that we do a lot of hiring for. So the police fall into a specific category. You're right, there are timelines that are set when you advertise. And when you advertise, those timelines are set up in every job posting that we put out. But it's once you get to the part where you do the examinations, and Clerk Stoddard will tell you this, is that sometimes as the information you get back from the testing companies or examination companies, you don't know what's going to happen. Psychologicals, you know with psychologicals, sometimes they can take forever to come back. So that's where that flexibility, if we can move quickly, and all it does is gives us a little bit more flexibility. A majority of the time, I don't expect this to be impacted, the 14 days where the HR director is going to be making a decision. I don't anticipate that to be the case. But there are going to be occasions where we're doing a lot of hirings within a small amount of time where it's going to be important for us. And we're going to lose out on top quality candidates.
Well, I feel comfortable with visiting that ordinance with those two different lists, and I feel comfortable with, we already have the 5 per charter. We used to have 3 before. At least there's more. If there was a way to add alternates, which I don't think there is because of, charter doesn't speak of that, but we already have enough for a quorum where we had a problem before where you had to have 2 out of 3. So at least you have 3 out of 5.
So in the meantime, we have this ordinance on the books right now.
Who's
This-
the
this behooves-
director of human resources? Do we have one?
I'm the acting human resources director at this moment.
And the personnel? Are you the personnel director also?
I think it's the same thing if you're talking about human resources.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know that there can be 2 different categories. I didn't know if the city had the same or if there was 2 different ones.
Human- As I understand, it's a human resources
That's
director.
the title we use, Human Resources Director.
Okay, but we don't do we have a personnel director? No, okay.
Same thing. I mean, it's a title change, it's a semantics. We don't have it's not two
Well,
positions.
because when Victor Santos was in that role, you were here also, so what was were you the personnel director, or did you have a different title?
No, he's Director of Administration.
Administration, okay, that's what I'm trying,
Okay.
I knew there was something that, I
I
mean,
get
it deals
confused
with.
sometimes with it.
Yeah,
too.
it deals with staff, so,
Councilman Cahoon,
Yes, sir.
would you like to form this into a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the amendments to, hang on, let's get them.
We've got 3, so I mean, first of all.
So, do we want to do them together, or do you want to do 2?
Do it separately, so you need to vote
All
2
right.
and 3.
So the first ordinance is the ordinance and amendment of Chapter 11, the revised ordinance of the City of East Providence. This is to amend Section 11-4 to allow the Personnel Director to certify employment and promotional lists not acted upon by Personnel Hearing Board within 14 days of their submission. So I move to approve said ordinance.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Because we don't have personnel director, do we need to say the human resources director, or is it just semantics? Doesn't matter.
I
Is
don't
that
know why
not,
there's a difference.
It's a
Doesn't
description.
matter.
It's not, the ordinance is what.
it's just description? Okay. Yeah, it's reasonable, I'll second.
Okay. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call, please vote?
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Nay.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
nay, based on what I had said earlier.
and Council President Brito.
Aye. Next.
So the second ordinance that we discussed would be an ordinance and amendment again of Chapter 11, specifically amending Sections 26, 28, 30, and 31 related to the Personnel Board appointment, terms and membership to conform with the city charter and other miscellaneous amendments, which we went through. So move to approve said ordinance and said sections.
Does he have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Nay.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
This speaks, because I just want to clarify, this speaks to the time, the 14 days more, so, okay.
Yeah.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is an ordinance and amendment of Chapter 11 of the revised ordinances of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island, 1998, as amended entitled Personnel. The summary is to amend Section 11-46 related to add additional grounds for discipline under the city code and modifies the number of votes necessary to discipline any council-appointed officer or employee. The sponsor is Councilman Cahoon.
So in addition to the various happy to glad changes that we talked about in the other ordinance already, which we won't discuss, essentially what this ordinance does is it changes the vote that the council requires in order to impose discipline, which is up to and including discharge from employment of its appointee, from a supermajority or a four-person vote to a majority to a three-person vote. So the rationale for doing this, and we've all been talking a lot about personnel lately, so I spent a lot of time reading through all of these ordinances and comparing them to the rest of the ordinances and the charter actions that the council does and is authorized to do. Starting with the rationale for 1146 change, reading through all of these led me to the discovery that per section 11-46, there is a supermajority requirement for the council to remove its own appointee, said appointee having been appointed with nothing more required than a majority vote. So first, that stands out to me as inconsistent. You can appoint a person by a majority. Why do you then need a supermajority to remove said person? I understand going back in time where that may have been a measure put in place to limit the revolving door on city managers. In the days when the city council appointed the chief executive of the city, perhaps that made sense. The chief executive no longer appoints, the city council no longer appoints the chief executive of the city. The electorate of the city of East Providence does. Now that further led me to an inquiry of what other ordinances and charter actions require a supermajority by the council in order to take place. And I found the following. Per charter, under section 3-6, passage of ordinance over veto, which we're all familiar with. I'm sure we could cite that off the top of our heads. One that I was not familiar with, under 4.16, there's a provision under the charter that allows the council to put in place an emergency appropriation outside of the budget cycle should there be something that, per the charter, quote, to meet a pressing need for public expenditure to protect the public health, safety, or welfare. So those are the only two by charter, those are the only two supermajority requirements for the council that require a supermajority by the council in order to enact. So I look at both of those things and I say, those are pretty big ticket items. The passage of an ordinance over veto speaks to the entire structure of checks and balances, which are put in place by the charter. Those are the same checks and balances really that you see mimicked or that mimic what's done at the federal and at the state level. Whenever there is a veto by the chief executive of the state or of the United States, it goes back to the legislative board and it requires additional oomph, if you will, in order to pass it over the veto. In the case of an emergency appropriation, I think this specifies quite clearly that the council's authority to establish the budget is the annual budget process, right? Any opportunity that the council has to go outside that process must be done by an emergency, must be in reaction to an emergency. Thereby, it makes sense that that requires a 4-1 vote. Big ticket items. So it's not really consistent with the charter for us to have a 4-1 vote in order to remove an appointee that we could appoint by 3-2. Following the same thread, what are the ordinances that require a 4-1 vote? One is 2-282, which is the rainy day fund. I think we all know about the establishment of the rainy day fund back in the days of the Budget Council, or the Budget Commission. In order for the council to authorize the city to tap in to the rainy day fund, a supermajority vote is required. 16-53, which involves increasing the year-on-year tax levy in an amount greater than 3.5% over the previous year. So, and that doesn't even allow us to do that because the state is the only authority that can allow us to exceed that 3.5% limit. It's set by state statute. But to even ask the state, to even pass a resolution to ask the state to do that, we need a 4-1 vote. Again, these are very big ticket items that are kind of wound into the existential fabric of the city. Changing sewer rates, for example, for some reason, 17-183, that requires a 4-1 vote. Not water rates, but sewer rate. So again, you're talking about things that impact literally the entire city. Things that have actions that have thousands or tens of thousands of stakeholders that require a supermajority vote. What else requires a supermajority vote? The council being able to remove appointees that it appointed by way of majority vote. To me, that seems inconsistent with the form and function and the sense of the charter. So that's my intro. I wanted to present that to the council and give the council the opportunity to consider changing it.
So the floor is open at this point in time for any council members that have any questions regarding this ordinance.
So I have reached out and spoke to the councilman regarding this, just because I had some questions, and I'm glad he spoke about it today, of what his rationale was for bringing this up and putting it on the docket. And I'm glad that he alluded to the city manager issue, because I think if we have had the provision of having the supermajority for that position to remove or not remove, then we wouldn't have that revolving door syndrome, which would then not have effectively changed our form of government. There would have been more substantial control over that. I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that it isn't as important as those that you mentioned in the charter that allude to having the supermajority. You make good, valid points for that, and I thank you for bringing those all out, because I didn't know a couple of them. But I do find it interesting that this is presented before us now. So if it was general housekeeping legislation where you came across it and we went through and this came about a year ago, and we were looking at it and we're like, you know what, this doesn't make sense for the exact reasons that you stated, I'd be like, yeah, absolutely, totally makes sense and not a problem. But given the situation that we're currently facing and the conditions that we're currently asked to consider, are put before us, and that we may have to consider ahead of time, I think this is, in all fairness, poor timing to put something like this before the council for a vote. And you might, and anybody else might think differently, and that's okay. It doesn't, it comes across with potential other motives, right? And I'm not saying that you're intentionally trying to have other motives, so please don't take it that way. But when I saw it on the docket, that's my first reaction, is that there's an alternative motive that drove this to come before the council. And if I'm thinking that, then I can only imagine that the rest of the community would be thinking the same thing. And when we're trying to have integrity and in a good conscience, we don't, God bless you, it's messy, for a better word. Not that it's not good and it wouldn't have been great a year ago, but today does not sit the same, it doesn't sit the same way.
Yeah, and I'll address that, because that's an obvious, I'll use Councilman Morato's phrase, the elephant in the room, right? That's an obvious elephant in the room issue. Why am I proposing it now? I discovered it now, within the last couple of weeks. Why was I reading through the personnel files? I've been reading through the personnel files because of what's been going on, and there's been a lot of discussion, and I wanted to understand them better. And I came across this particular issue and said, doesn't make sense. So what is the appropriate time to present it to the council? Sit on a piece of bad legislation or poor logic for a year, 6 months? I don't know. So it's being presented to the council now because I've discovered it now. I will also say, I think it's no surprise to anyone. We've seen stories in the local papers that we're looking at a situation where the city may be discussing a situation with the current clerk, who is an appointee of the council, about a separation. That's been in the paper, right? It is likely or reasonably possible that within the near future, this council could be asked to appoint another clerk if that agreement goes through or if something else happens. Given that situation, I don't think it makes any sense at all to bring another clerk into the same situation or make another appointee on a majority that we would then be tied to a supermajority to have to remove. I think it's important to recognize the fact that that appointee that the council has is simply a political appointee. And this happens in every political body, state, federal level. Political appointees get appointed all the time. Sometimes they do fantastic bang-up jobs. Sometimes they don't. Just kind of the nature of government, you have to realize that they're there. It's important, I think, also, if you look through the duties or the qualifications that are specified for the clerk via charter, via ordinance, there really are essentially none, right? So this council could literally appoint anybody to that position by way of a majority, just like we do everything else. Approve budgets, approve entering into contracts, approve zoning changes and ordinances. We could appoint anyone we want. The only qualification is, well, you should give preference to somebody who lives in the city. All right, but you don't have to. We could appoint somebody who's coming from California or Maine or whatever, right? There are literally no qualifications. So having the ability to appoint somebody with no required qualifications and having that person be in that job and only being able to remove a person with no qualifications who may ultimately not be able to perform the duties, only being able to do that through supermajority, to me makes no sense at all. I don't think it's at all consistent with the interests of the city of East Providence. I don't think it's a recipe for success. And I think it's something that we need to consider changing.
Any other further questions, comments, suggestions?
I think a lot was said there. I'm certainly not going to repeat it. I tend to agree. I think that this does not, a political appointee does not rise to the level of a super majority. It just doesn't make any sense. I haven't heard any reason. As far as motives, you can think what you want, and I'm not saying you're accusing anybody here, Councilwoman, but certainly no motive on my part. I'll put that right on the table now. We're not the ones who put stories out in the press. You know, we're trying to fix a situation, and this brings some consistency to political appointees, which we really only have one.
I disagree with you. It is a critical appointment. The clerk's office has many
Oh, I
responsibilities.
didn't say it wasn't a critical appointment,
You said it didn't rise to the level of being a critical appointment. Did you not?
but majority part of it. The appointment is absolutely critical, and we've always had good luck with those positions.
The appointment of a city clerk is a critical appointment, in my opinion. They deal with many tasks from, municipal court to probate court, recordings and whatever else they do. And they deal with a fairly large budget also. To have as Councilwoman Souza pointed out, where they had the city manager every 6 months change because they had the 3 votes. If that was a supermajority, we would have had less of a turnover, okay? And this form of government probably would never have even been a discussion. So to have the same happen in that appointment, which is a political appointment, as you said, and down the road when things don't work out, are we going to have the same revolving door because of political indifferences? I don't know. So I don't agree with this ordinance. I think the motives are the motives which have been stated here tonight. And obviously, it's going to pass. We all know that. But I will not be voting in favor of this ordinance.
May I ask you a question, Councilman Morado? Because I know you've been a police officer for a number of years. I'm assuming you've been a supervisor for some period of time, right?
Correct.
And I've been a supervisor as well on the state and federal level. It is my perspective that the ability for a supervisor to impose discipline is critical to the supervisor's effectiveness in being able to supervise an employee. Would you agree or not?
Yes, but, the only difference with that is this. I've been in situations where I am the policy writer for the department. We have had supervisors who have tried to discipline people and the policy wasn't even approved yet. In other words, we discipline based on what everyone knows what the rules are ahead of time. You get hired, here's what the rules are. You get out of your car, you have to put your hat on. You know, you show up on time. If you get caught sleeping, you get punished for this. The rules are all spelled out.
All right, so
Okay.
let me finish this through, right?
So, well, we had mentioned and talked, an executive session, which I'm not going to get into details, obviously. You can expect someone to do a job when they weren't given the parameters as to how to do that job or a description on how to perform that task. So you're trying to, it's as if you're finding people for doing 40 on a 25, but yet it's not posted 40, it's still posted 25. Well, we didn't change the signs yet, I'm sorry, or the ordinance. That's essentially what's happening here.
So I think those are legitimate points, but let's follow this through. The council appointee, the clerk is really the only council appointee of note for this particular discussion, right? Because there are boards and commissions, most of them are appointed by the mayor. So the council appointee reports to the council. In effect, as horrible a design as this is, this 5-person body is the supervisor for the city clerk. Would you agree with that? The 5-person body acts as the supervisor.
In essence, yes.
Okay. This 5-person body, which by a majority can implement budgets, can pass ordinances, can impose tax levies, can enter into contracts, can decide by way of ballot items which items people in the city are going to vote on, all by majority. This same supervisory body cannot, by majority, discipline its own employee. How does that make any sense or result in an effective governance?
Like the two previous ordinances that you put forward, again, if you want to fix the problem, you address that issue and how to implement those, how to have a job description, how, what happens if you, come in late. If you don't know the playbook or the rules, how are you going to follow the rules? Okay? How can you punish someone, as I use that analogy of speeding, for going 40 on a 25 when the signs haven't been changed yet or the ordinance hasn't been passed yet?
Well, that's the nature of a political appointee, right? I mean, the examples that you pointed out, which are good ones, right, which certainly apply to federal employees who are under a bargaining unit, certainly police officers who are under a collective bargaining agreement. There are certain things laid out for their discipline, for their performance, how often you have to have performance evaluations. But they're also much harder to hire. You cannot politically appoint a police officer. You cannot politically appoint a person to work in DPW. They must go through an entire process in order to get to that union. We can literally appoint, by a 3-person vote, we could appoint anybody in this crowd.
So to that I say, you want to fix the process, you want to fix the system, you put criteria in there. We have one criteria right now for the solicitor, right? Live in town, or should live in town, or whichever way it reads.
Should, yeah.
So why not have, moving forward, a criteria, a job description, performance evals, all of these things that you're mentioning? And by the way, discipline is also, it's in steps. It's depending on.
Not for political appointees, it's not. They're hired and fired all the time.
So with that, I'm going to say there's no way that you're going to change my mind, obviously, and we can stay here all night debating this.
Understood.
So I already pled my case, and I just want to move forward. Thank you.
So,
Yes, sir.
just real quickly, I would just say that there are basic responsibilities and basic duties that come out of that office. And one is that we require minutes to the meetings, whether they're here, out in public, or in executive session. Basic. Those are basic, we know for a fact. We all know that. So regardless of what your experience is, that comes first. And if that can't be done, then there's an issue. There's a problem as far as I'm concerned. There are other clerks in that office can handle other duties in that office as well. But the basic responsibility for a clerk is to at least take the meeting minutes, number one, and/or the executive meeting minutes. And as we heard earlier, that just hasn't been done. You know, my thing is, when we talk about timing and poor timing and how this ordinance comes into play, it really, there's no really timing for this. I mean, I've seen ordinances come and introduce at times that, you know, that I thought was, you know, boy, this is bad timing. The tree ordinance, for an example, I'll give you. That came at a time when we were going through Metacomet, and the developer was taking down dead trees, and they were doing their, you know, cleaning up of their maintenance of their property, and then all of a sudden, a tree ordinance came out of nowhere. But that timing was poor as well, the way I look at it. So why is this any different than that?
And you voted
ordinance?
against that.
I most certainly did.
Yeah.
I most certainly, but I'm not talking about whether I voted for or against. I'm talking about the timing of it, and that's what this conversation is, about the timing of this ordinance.
So, again, it's because of the changing from a 4 to a 3, because we know that you just need now the 3 versus a 4. So if there's an issue that requires a disciplinary action, I would think that everybody up here was put in this seat because they are intelligent, they have good moral character, they have good integrity, and they're gonna make decisions that are not based solely on emotion or personal issues that they may have with any particular person, that it's going to be something that's fair and just once a process has gone through, right? So we wouldn't have to be concerned that we only need to get 3 people versus the 4, because if it makes sense and it's right, regardless what our personal involvement is, whether we care or don't care for a particular person or position, we're gonna make the right decision based on the facts, right? So we wouldn't need to change anything to have it just 3, which makes it easier to just be, for the disciplinary action to take place, or a discharge.
So we were just given a whole list of facts in executive session. I'm not going to get into it, but I would say, what else do we need? Based on those facts that were given to us.
I'm not gonna speak on that.
We're given a list of facts, and I knew nothing about it, 2.5 years prior. So the progression, the disciplinary progression is not even there, okay? I don't care if it's federal, state, local, when someone's in a contract, collective bargaining agreement, there's steps, unless you do something completely egregious.
So this is all I'm saying. A political appointee that is appointed by this body need only make 2 friends on this body to avoid discipline. And if you're going to tell me that that particular scenario is not consistent with the history of East Providence, I've lived here my whole life. That's just nonsense. I've seen this body do all sorts of crazy things in the past.
Councilman Cahoon, aren't you contradicting your ordinance?
No,
Well, you just
I'm
said
not.
make 2
What I
friends.
specifically said
Wouldn't
is
it be best for them
this,
to make 4 friends and make sure that,
this body cannot discipline its own political appointee, as this thing is currently written, without a supermajority. Without a supermajority. So if there are 2 people that are not going to be involved in the discipline, no discipline is going to incur. And if you're going to tell me that that's the best path forward for the entire city of Providence, East Providence, that a person cannot be disciplined simply because of political connections, my mind explodes. I don't know how you can justify that.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if that's a concern, then it should be addressed properly moving forward. Those rules need to be spelled out. Job performances need to be spelled out. All of that is not spelled out right now.
So, I
Maybe
would
job
largely,
requirements.
I would largely agree with that, which is why the Charter Commission, when they proposed the change to the clerk position, proposed that it go under the administration and not be a council appointee, not be somebody who's subject to supervision by 5 people. That's in their minutes. That is something that the past council, a 3-person body, by the way, chose to reject before it went to the voters to vote on.
Honestly, I thank God for that. I honestly do. So,
I don't know why.
good call by that council at that point.
I don't know how that makes sense.
Because the mayor has 300 appointments that make up all of the boards and commissions right now. And if that clerk was under his, control, we would have nothing left on this council.
And so you think it's,
Okay,
you think
nothing.
it's an ideal situation to have one employee?
And then the next
report-
thing would have been, he
report
would
to
have
5
used
bosses.
meddling with personnel issues. Every time we call her and ask for something to be on the docket, there'll be some little shenanigans that will be played at that, in that regard.
So you think it's a good idea to have one person
Councilman
report to
Cahoon,
5
I am
bosses?
done discussing this.
Excellent.
I am ready to
So move to
vote.
approve.
And let's not forget, we have a legal process going on here. We're going to get these facts that everybody wants. I second.
Okay. So with that being said, based on the ordinance that's presented to the council,
Sorry, hold on. I'm going to retract my motion. There is a word correction in here. If
Retract.
you look down,
Okay.
retract my motion.
Sure.
Looking down to sections number 10 in red,
We all don't have the red.
Second, number 10.
Number
sorry,
10?
section
Okay.
10, which is a new
Section 10,
section.
yep.
The very last word in that sentence says ordinance. That word should be manual, not ordinance. So with that said, I am going to move to amend the ordinance as presented to change that word in section 10 from ordinance to manual.
That's the first amendment. So that's an amendment. Let's vote on that amendment first.
Yes. that's-
Section
my motion
11,
is to
46,
make the
dash
amendment.
46. Okay,
Second the amendment.
okay. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Nay.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye.
So the second motion is to move to pass the ordinance as amended.
Second, as amended.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Nay.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Nay.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
Adjournment.
Mr. President, could I ask the indulgence of the council to adjourn today in the memory of longtime Riverside and East Providence icon Charles Chuck Vermette, who is being buried tomorrow, wake today. He was a 35, 40-year school teacher, coach, administrator, and legendary umpire and official and referee, and quite the character. And he passed away this week, and he's certainly someone that many in East Providence have looked up to. And I would make a motion to adjourn in his memory.
Thank you,
And
Councilman.
I will second, and you talk about somebody who had an impact over tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives over decades as an instructor, as a coach, as a mentor. I mean, everybody feels this, so second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza, Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you.